In this example, we are going to create the plate project that you can see in our BenTech SM logo. Our base plate is going to be 15 inches long by 5 inches wide, so we first need to create some points defining that flange. We'll start by hitting the Create tab, hitting the Point button. Using the incremental method, we will enter a 15 into our X field and a 5 into our Y field, thus setting a point using our origin point 15 inches away and 5 inches above our origin point. We next can use our line method with our rectangle option to connect these 2 points. Selecting the furthest point, we can spread out a rectangle to our origin point. Now we have the 4 lines outlining the base flange. We next can create some of the features for this flange. This flange will have a cutout on this one end, so we can start out by laying that out by starting a point using the Entity Center option. Once we have that laid out on our far left line, we can create an arc at that point. Using the arc method, we will now change our radius to a 2-inch radius. Our starting angle will be at 270, which is going to be down at the bottom here, and our end angle is going to be up at the top at a 90-degree angle. As we move our cursor, you'll see the arc is following it. We'll select the point that we created at Entity Center of this left-hand line, laying out that arc. We now can trim away the excess lines that we don't need by using the Break Single method, selecting the feature we want to trim and where we want to trim it to at this arc. Once we have that completed, we can delete that line by using the Delete tab, the single selection. We're going to delete just the line, so we want to select the line we want to delete, hitting Selection Complete, removing that line. We can now start to lay out some of the dimples for this base flange. We will start by using the Create tab and laying out a point for that. Our first point is going to be 4 inches away from the point that we created at the midpoint of our arc. Once we fill in the values, we can place our point by selecting that point at the midpoint of the arc. Our next step is to create our dimple holes. Using our Hole button, we can select the dimple method. In this case, our inner diameter is going to be 1.5. Our outer diameter is going to remain at 2 inches, and we will change our height. We will now use a grid method to repeat these. We want 3 holes, so we'll have 3 columns of holes, and they'll be spaced at 4 inches. Once we have that, you will see we have 3 holes following the cursor. Selecting the point that we created to lay out these dimple holes, we will now place those 3 holes. Now we have the base flange of our project created. So we will define that flange by hitting the Sheet Bends tab, the Definition button, selecting the material we want to use, and hitting Define Flange, and then clicking on that flange. Next, we need to add a couple different bends to each end of this. So we'll use the Add Bend button. In this case, it's going to be a 90-degree bend with a 1-inch height facing in the up position. Using the 0.3 radius, we will select where we want our bends created. In this case, we want one here at the top line, so we'll select that top line. We will name that flange, and selecting OK, it now places our new bend. We also want to duplicate that bend down at the bottom, so we'll go back to the Add Bend button. Leaving all the same parameters, we'll click on the bottom of our base flange. Selecting OK, we'll place that flange again. We now need to add some features to these 2 bends. We're going to add a series of holes, as we will demonstrate now. Using the Create button, we need to select our first point. In this case, we're going to select the point that is 1 inch on the x-axis and 0.5 on the y-axis. Selecting the bottom left-hand corner of our end flange, we will now place that first point. We then need to create our holes for that first point. We're going to use round holes. with a diameter of 0.375. We'll use our grid method once again, using 3 rows at a spacing of 6.5 inches. We can now place our holes on that point we created. We now have all the features of that bottom flange created. We now need to redefine it. Moving up and duplicating what we just did at our top flange, we will select that flange, highlighting it, letting us know that it's active, placing our point to create our holes. Since we have all the parameters left from our last flange, we can just select point, setting our new point, moving to hole, selecting the round hole again. All those parameters are still in there, so we just move the holes to that point we created. We can now redefine that side of the flange. Now once we have everything laid out, we can use the shaded display to show our completed creation.